because families have my cell phone number, they'll text me and say, Dr. West, I can't get in to see my pediatrician or nobody will call me back. I really just want to run this by you. My husband was like, you need to stop giving away money because that's free care, free advice. One of my challenges is sort of like cutting the umbilical cord.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I have Dr. Janet West, MD, MBA, as well as founder and owner of RVA Baby, which is a concierge pediatric newborn practice in Virginia. Mm-hmm. That's actually something I've never heard of. I've never heard of like a concierge practice for newborns, and definitely pediatrics. I didn't know that you could really do that and be profitable. So that's why we have you on the show, Dr. Janet, to come and talk about you starting this practice, as well as, how you've been able to recognize as well as defeat burnout. So first of all, Dr. Janet, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, good. We're excited to have you here. Look, let's jump into this. Tell us a little bit about RVA Baby. What is that?
So RVA Baby is what I call a holistic newborn practice. And what that means is because I'm doing house calls and taking care of newborns at home from 0 to 3 months, it allows me to provide like full scope care with the family centered. So everything from your lactation support to bilirubin testing to any type of special care a newborn might need in that first 3 months, that's what we do. And we do it with mom and dad in mind to help them transition through that postpartum period.
Yeah, this is really rare, though, isn't it? Like you're almost like a unicorn. There's not many newborn concierge practices out there.
Exactly. So there's some house calls practices, and you'll see them popping up around the country. So it's just straight pediatric house calls. But my focus, because my love is for newborn babies, so I decided that I was just going to focus on newborn care. And I came to the idea of newborn care because I was having some burnout issues, and a good friend of mine was like, you don't need to quit medicine, like figure out what you love about medicine. And I was always that resident that would like sneak up to the nursery in the middle of the night and play with the babies. And
oh, that was you. You was that one.
I was that one with the grandmas in the rocking chair with the newborns. That was all me. And so babies are like, they're just amazing, miraculous little beings. And so I was finishing up my MBA and interviewing to be a CMO, was offered a CMO job. And decided
so
I didn't
you was
like
about to transition out. You was done.
Oh yeah, I was out. Yeah. Okay. But in all of the interviews I did, I was just like, I don't really feel like I fit with these people. This whole idea of pushing physicians to put out widgets and, this fake sense of quality that you're supposed to have. So we're doing quality initiatives, and that just means making the system run smoother so people don't get angry.
It's almost like a middle management almost.
Exactly. So I finished up my MBA, quit my job in New York, came back to Virginia. And as a matter of fact, before I left New York, I had started RVA Baby LLC. So I came up with the name and hadn't seen a patient, didn't have articles of incorporation yet, had nothing. But
where were you working before this? You said you were in New York City?
Mm-hmm. So I was working at an FQHC.
What was your practice style? Okay, so federally qualified healthcare center.
Yeah, it was an FQHC. Okay. And I was a medical director for the pediatric division. So they had in-school clinics. They had mobile units. I was the medical director for the entire school health system there in Albany. And I also sat on their Medicaid transformation team. Yeah, I was in Albany. Yeah.
Like you get that snow. Okay, you get that. All right, got you. So
that was not fun.
Got you. How long were you in that type of practice style for?
Actually, I've been medical director at a lot of different places, like in military clinics. I've been medical director, but I went to New York simply because I had an empty nest and I was ready for a new adventure. And, so, I found a cute little place. Someone offered me a job and I was like, hey, we'll go do it. And the interesting thing about that FQHC was that we had lots of immigrants and refugees from Burma and the Middle East. So I got to really experience all this big multicultural type of, practice where you had to be quick on your toes because these aren't your everyday patients. So I just love that. And the reason why I came back home is because after being there for a year and being away from the family, I was like, I guess it's time to come back. So
Okay.
that's what
So
I did.
you started the process of opening up your own practice in the midst of kind of being burnt out and so forth.
Hmm.
There's one thing to recognize that you're burnt out. And I think there's another thing to taking the next steps. And then also the next step is opening up something that there aren't many of. So take us through that process of why did you decide to focus specifically on the newborn part and then monetizing that in a practice? How did you say, okay, based off of what I'm learning, this is something that's profitable? Like, did you have to do like market research in the areas that because you were leaving New York City, coming back to VA? I'm sure like you
Hmm.
had to evaluate if there's even a market for it.
Feasible.
Yeah.
Right. And Richmond has been going through a baby boom for a long time. There are lots of big companies here, Capital One, JP Morgan. So this is a town that's growing. We have lots of growing families. So I did know that when I came back. Um, but the other thing that I have to be honest about was I'm not a risk averse person, and I took the leap too early. And I realized that because I left New York, came here with no job, and decided to start a new practice, right? That's not the way to do it necessarily. So I just jumped right into it. And because I didn't have a model to follow, I feel like I was able to be more flexible. Do I need an EMR? I don't need that. What is the need in the community? One of the things you learn when you're getting an MBA and you're doing marketing, it's like, okay, if there's a problem, you need to show people that you have the solution. And I figured out early on that when I was in practice in the clinic, I would have these moms come in. They had a C-section. 24 hours later, they're sitting back in my office, you know, new circumcision. I mean, new C-section scar and new baby. And they only get to spend 10 to 15 minutes with me. And so
Hmm.
they go home, they're overwhelmed, they're not prepared, and then they start Googling. The flip side of that, when I was a hospitalist, I would send moms home and dads home, and I'd say, hey, your baby needs to be seen first thing in the morning so they can have a weight check and a bilirubin. And that also didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like that's how you should provide care to new moms. And the European model is that you have that support at home for the first 6 weeks. So I decided to do something that sort of looked like that European model. And one of my biggest challenges early on was because I didn't think about profitability when I started this. I was thinking about this is what I want
Really?
to do. Oh,
Okay, I got
yeah.
you. So the
So
passion came first.
the passion came first, and which is true to form for the way I function. Like I said, I'm not very risk averse, and sometimes that's to my detriment. So, um, long story short, I joined some of the local networking community, and I met someone who does web design. I met someone who does brand design. I met an attorney, and I met all of these wonderful people. There's a local group called Rebel, and it's like a female entrepreneurship group, and they had a big conference, and I met so many people there that I could connect with and then start going out into the community and making connections. Now, um,
From
the other
from
big,
from moving to Virginia to actually starting to practice, what kind of timeline are we talking about? How many years or
15
months?
months, 15
Oh,
months.
wow.
Hmm.
And this was going to be a like you're going to the goal was to have like an actual establishment, like a building, brick mortar, or is this supposed to be like mobile?
It is completely mobile. So initially my vision was for it to be completely mobile. My car is my office. And so that limits the overhead, right? I don't need a bunch of equipment. I just need things that I can carry into the home and do all the things that I need to do for a baby. So the overhead was very minimal. Getting funding was hard because people kept looking at me going, do you think that's scalable? So funding was a challenge. I never got any seed money. I actually went and did locums work while I was running this
Hmm.
business early on until my patient, my reputation, began to, grow in the community. Um, and there was lots of pivoting because, like I said, there was no template for it. Um, the interesting thing is that when you're opening a practice, you think about as a physician that you're going to network with other physicians in the community. Um, but th- everybody in the community and a lot of these people I know looked at me like I had two heads when I said I wanted to do this practice. They really did. So
I can
a
imagine
lot of the net.
you're disrupting a lot of the, I can imagine you disrupting referral patterns, as well
Mhm.
as people are like, well, should I send you a patient who I don't know? Like, first of all, I'm not familiar with this practice. How do I know this practice is going to be there in a year, 2 years? Why would I send patients to you? I can imagine that's what they possibly were thinking.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And so out of the blue, a midwife called me who does home births, and I connected with her. So RVA Baby started as being part of the birthing community in Richmond, which is
Okay.
robust in terms of home births and birthing centers, even midwives at some of the big hospitals like VCU in town. So that's where the connection started. And then my reputation began to grow in the pediatric space. So now pediatricians are like, hey, you can see Dr. West for the first 2 months because they recognize that they're really not able to care for those babies and those moms the way they should be.
So how does someone, like, how do you convince a newborn, or how do you convince families or parents to go towards you instead of the normal pediatrician who's going to see them, in 2 to 3 days or something like that, and make sure that, they haven't lost weight or anything like that. And definitely something that is covered by insurance, right? How do you present that pricing model to someone that's like, yo, your insurance is going to cover going to this traditional thing, or you can come and see me and do ABCD. Talk
Hmm.
to us about that.
So early on, my prices were super low. Like my prices were about maybe 30% of what they are now.
Dr. West, yo, you
Um,
got to turn the lights on, man. You got to pay for gas.
you know, so yeah, so there goes my retirement. Don't tell anybody. But but now I feel like I'm, charging what the market will bear. But all of my clients are referred by word of mouth. So it's
Okay.
like somebody in church had a baby and they're like, you have got to have Dr. West. I don't care what you do. You have got to have Dr. West. And
Do you
what
find that
I'm,
to be a hard
what,
sell to pay to get you get these parents to pay cash, or is this like already like, because there's certain communities or there's certain community
mm-hmm.
people who are just like, like, all right, they're gonna pay for this, right? And then there's other people who are like, oh, I don't know. If it's a whole community that's like, yo, we got insurance, we good, or are they
There's a
used to kind
mix
of
of
coming
it.
out of pocket, right? Hmm.
There's a mix. Like I have a huge demographic, right? So I have, moms that live in $1 million houses or families that live in
Okay,
$1 million houses on
gotcha.
the river. And then I have some folks who legit live in the hood and grandma and grandpa, pulled money together so that they could have the care. Um, where I am right now, though, is that the word of mouth isn't pushing me into the revenue stream that I'm looking for. So I want to
Hmm.
be more proactive about marketing, which is why, I connected with a group to do some video and some promos so that I can start getting the word out. Because I can't tell you how many times people have said, you do what? If I had known about you when I had my baby. So that's kind of where I'm going
Okay.
to see if I
Now,
can't
and
get that revenue stream going.
Now I can imagine, like, things don't normally happen during office hours. So what's it like? Because a concierge, I'm thinking that they have access to you 24/7.
Hmm.
And there's that notion that, the likelihood of there being an emergency is really low. But in newborn land, you have newborns and then you also have new parents oftentimes. I can
Exactly.
imagine like you're up, there's a lot of phone calls in the middle of the night, right?
No, I can count on one hand in 5 years plus how many times I've gotten a middle of the night phone call. And that's
Really?
because when I am with them, I'm not only doing an exam, but I'm talking to them and I'm pointing things out. That belly button is probably going to get funky. You see these rashes? This is what this looks like. We talk through all of it. We talk about soothing. We look at the bed space, the sleep space. I'm in it for an hour. I'm watching latching, and then I'm talking about newborn behavior, talking about what does cluster feeding look like, all those types of things so that they're prepared and they do feel prepared. And the interesting thing is, my families are so awesome because they will wait until 7 o'clock before they start texting me because I always tell them between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., anything that's non-urgent, um, go for it, right? If it's urgent in the middle of the night, then call me in the middle of the night if you have to. but I always tell them, you define what urgent is. That's not my place to do it. And they will wait till 7 o'clock and they'll be like, Dr.
Okay.
West, he was so gassy and fussy last night. I was like, well, we talked about this, right? So what did you do? And then we just talk through it. It really is a relationship that I have with them.
And this is a per month, it's a membership fee, like they pay per month.
It is actually, there are packages. So I call them like retainers. So if you want 1 month of care, there's a set price. If you want 2 months or if you want 3 months, there's a set price for each one of those packages. And then I have, because we're now dealing with inflation and a lot of people are worried about money. So for a lot of my moms, they just want that one initial newborn visit at home. So they don't have to go to the pediatrician until like their 2-week visit. So I have that established. And then the other big change that I made was to start a direct primary care, which is like another arm of RVA Baby. It's called RVA Baby Plus, because revenue was doing this. Like if it was baby boom season, we were doing well. We were kicking butt. But if it wasn't baby boom season, then, I was seeing a lot of dips in my revenue. So I started a direct primary care with just 100 kids, and that's a monthly membership for 12 months. So for 1 kid or 2 kids or 3 kids, there's a different tier. And then if they want vaccines, then they pay out of pocket for the vaccines. And that has really helped stabilize my revenue. So from month to month, I have like predictable revenue coming with the newborn in-home care on top of that. So I see babies in the office in the morning, and then I do my house calls visits in the afternoons, and I do Saturdays and Sundays.
I actually can see how a pediatric practice would really flourish in for certain folks, because, as someone who's a father to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, sometimes, trying to get your child into your normal pediatrician's office, for a sick visit is difficult, particularly if you're working, if you're single. Those are really difficult to fit them in during a timing that works not only for the doctor, but also works for you as a parent. It's tough. So I'm really interested in that. So how long did it take for your business to really, quote unquote, be like profitable with this type of model?
I would say 2 years ago is when I really felt like I hit my stride. Like I didn't have to do any more locums work. I wasn't, picking up side hustles every now and then. I feel like 2 to 3 years ago, I was in it. And the other piece to that is, one of my challenges actually is that because families have my cell phone number, my RVA baby phone, they will, and this has been happening a lot this week, they'll text me and say, Dr. West, I can't get in to see my pediatrician, or nobody will call me back, and I really just want to run this by you. And my husband was like, you need to stop giving away money, because that's free care and free advice.
Sure.
So
I see.
One of my challenges is sort of like, cutting the umbilical cord, because they all have the option. Everybody, I will tell them, once you graduate from RVA Baby, if you need an acute visit, like a sick visit at home, I will do that for you. This is how much it costs.
What does graduating from RVA Baby mean?
It means that it's time for your baby to transition into a typical pediatric clinic.
Yeah, so that's where I want you to clarify, and if you could help me. So how does this work? Like, are you the primary pediatrician for these parents or for these newborns, or is this in combination? Are you almost like an urgent care for newborns, basically, so to speak, that's in a concierge model, or?
It's full scope pediatric care. So I'm their PCP for that first 1, 2, or 3 months. And after they graduate, if they need urgent care, I give it. If they join my practice, they just, they can schedule online, they can come see me if they have any issues, and they can text me, and they can get consults online as a part of their membership in the DPC part of it.
So your specialty, you're saying that your niche specialty is that 1 to 3 month range. And then if they graduate, they can go see they can go see a pediatrician in a traditional sense. If they want to continue to work with you, then it becomes almost like a deep, direct primary care where you're seeing, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and 7-year-olds. And
exactly.
So forth. Okay. Now I get it.
I trained with most of the pediatricians in this community, because I went to VCU and MCV for residency and med school. And so now it's funny, everybody's figured out what I do, and now they're more comfortable with it. So when I see them, I send a summary to that pediatrician. If there's something to keep an eye on, I send all of that information over to them. So they have the complete record. They know that I've given them good lactation support. they when they get that baby is sort of out of that newborn window for the most part. So it's not as intense for them. They're not having to worry about missing calls from new mothers and that kind of stuff because it's hard in a traditional practice to support new families. You just don't have the bandwidth because you have to.
And that's what I want. Yeah, and that's what I want to know. Like, what's the relationship with the traditional pediatricians who normally would do this, and now they see you coming up? Is it more of a relief to them, or is it kind of like, oh, we got beef, we got like she's our competition, and we got to do whatever we need to do to make this happen and get her off? Like, what's that like?
I have had zero of that, really.
Zero what? Beef or zero
Of
collegiality?
beef.
Okay.
Zero beef. If there's beef, I'm not aware of it. Seriously.
Okay.
I will say that somebody's coming to my door for some breast milk. I will say,
Hey guys,
that
we
there
keep
are
it. This is
some.
how we do it. This is reality podcasting. That's
There
how we
you
like
go.
it.
Yeah. I will say, there's another concierge pediatrician that doesn't do house calls. And then there's another one who just does house calls from 0 to 21. And when I started RVA Baby, they were already in practice and they brought me in and embraced me and said, hey, it's so good to have another person out here doing this work. And that felt like I've met them for lunch and seen them at events, and we are always very cordial. And the other benefit is you have these new parents. They're looking for me to help them choose a pediatrician. And so we go through that process. We go through the vaccine schedule in detail, ad nauseum. We talk about what transition to a pediatric practice looks like. And then I try to find a pediatrician that's a good fit for them. And that might mean, okay, this family is hesitant about vaccines. This practice is sensitive to that. Or, this family is all anti-medicine. There's somebody in the community that can do that too. So it's about helping them make a decision about what's the best thing for them as they transition into a new practice. So I've gotten a lot of respect because they know those kids are coming to them.
I'm interested in how you're able to convince, because it looks like you have a wide spectrum in the socioeconomic status of the parents, right? Like you said, you have some parents who are able to afford $1 million homes, and then parents who not so really are able to afford that and maybe struggling to some extent. So for the folks who are listening and they're like, hey, I want to do something like that, but maybe I live, in New York City and I'm in the Bronx, or I live in, someplace else where there's a large proportion of, like a depressed socioeconomic state, but there's a need for this, obviously. Like, how do you convince them? What are the things that you do to convince your patients who come from that type of background to ditch the traditional model and to use your model and to come out of pocket and pay for that? What methods, tips, how are you convincing them, marketing to convince them to do that?
Two things. About 4 years ago, a family that I worked with decided that they wanted to donate money to RVA Baby for parents who couldn't afford it. And I was like, okay, what do I do with this money? So I have a dear friend who runs a nonprofit. She runs our regional capital area health education center. And so we were able to put a line item on her budget. So folks would donate money, and folks in the community, if they saw a family that they felt like would benefit from the services but couldn't afford it, would refer them. And so that would cover some of that cost. That's the first thing. It's not a functioning nonprofit per se. The nonprofit is the area health education center, but this is one of the ways because one of their missions is maternal mental health. And so that's one of the ways that I can support that demographic. The other thing is, again, Mima, Papa, aunties will buy gift certificates. When people are like, gosh, I really want to do this, but I can't afford it. I was like, put it on your baby shower registry. You don't need all the things that you think you need, right? That's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, rather than have like 5 baby warmers, like one white warmer is needed. The rest can go towards possibly purchasing this. I see. So you're more realistic with the way how people look at like funding a 529, kind of similar. Put that money towards
it's like,
this.
what's the most important thing right now? So, and people will spend money on things that they want if they see the value in it, right? And this isn't true across the board, but to some degree, if they feel like it's worth it enough, they're going to do what they need to do to get it. And so I think that sort of helped on the lower end. I have a lot of families that are entrepreneurs. They own restaurants and they don't even have health insurance. So, that's another demographic there too.
I'm interested, as last question is you said that you help the parents, specifically, obviously mothers, and I think that's where everybody has their attention towards, mother and child. But you also say you help fathers. So I'm really interested, like, what specifically do men need? What kind of help do you normally see based off of your practice patterns that fathers need to become better fathers? As someone who's done this twice already, but we do have a good, component of guys who are listening. What do you normally give in terms of like prescriptive advice or advice for them?
Well, the very first thing I want to do is help dads be seen because everything is focused on baby and mom, right?
True,
and so
true. Can we get some love?
Yes,
Dag.
yes. Dads get all the love. And so, especially if there was a traumatic birth, like mom will be like, oh, this happened, that happened. And I look at the dad and I say, hey, how are you doing? That goes a long way. When I'm talking to parents, if I notice that the dad's not engaged, I'm like, all right, what's going on here? And I tell dads in the presence of mom, I tell moms in the presence of dads, I'm sorry, you need to let him do what he needs to do with the baby to get to know the baby. You can't control everything. Let him help you. Don't correct him. He's not going to hurt the baby. So, I know Mama Bear's there. You guys are a team and you need to let him experience this in his way. I have that conversation a lot. Like he wants to help you, but you can also create a space where he doesn't feel like he's needed or wanted, and then he's going to pull back and not help. When I do visits, if dad's in the other room, like I've had a couple families like dad's on the game box, or I'm like, dude, come on in here. This is a family visit. This is not a baby visit. This is a family visit. Get off that computer. Yeah. And so I can tell when they're fighting. If I go in and they're not making eye contact, thumbs up. And I have no qualms about pointing out the elephant in the room. What's going on? You guys aren't working together. What happened? And, we get all kinds of responses. But there's a little marriage counseling that I do in there too. Just a little bit.
I can imagine. Mm-hmm. Well, look, this was great. Why don't you take a moment real quick, just kind of let people know about where, if they want to get in contact with you, they can get in contact with you, or even just learn more about your practice. Because I'm sure we have residents who are listening. We even have some young attendings who are thinking about doing something very similar and would like to maybe reach out to you or kind of learn, from a graphic or website standpoint, how you're doing things.
Awesome. Well, my website is www.myrvababy.com, and they can email me at whatsnext@myrvababy.com. One of the things I did want to mention is that I do plan to move into other markets as I grow. So that would be a great way to partner with somebody who's looking to do this, in Atlanta or in Charlottesville, Virginia, in different communities. So there's some communities where this is a really good model for growth and for practice. So we want to expand.
Would this be like a franchise model, or just be? Would it be like you're franchising, or you'll be like, you'll be, because when you say partner, I'm assuming you'll get another doctor or several other doctors who are in other areas. Mm-hmm. Is this something that you would own, or you kind of franchise it out?
I'm still debating that, right? Mm-hmm. So there are some benefits to controlling the show, so to speak, like me being the medical director for all of those different regions. But I'm also getting old. And so there's some things about franchise that look good too, right? I give them all the things, give them all the marketing. They pay me this, lump sum of money, and we get some residuals from their practice as they move on. I can see some joy in that too. So
it'll be very interesting. You should keep us in contact and let us know, because I'd be really interested to see when you start to expand what kind of model you take. But I cut you off. Go ahead and finish what you were saying, please.
I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. Don't worry. We'll figure it out when we stop recording. That's when it'll come back, and that's kind of how it works in podcasting. But Dr. Janet West, this was great. Everyone listening, this is a newborn concierge practice, as well as a direct primary care practice for once they go past, you said what, 3 months?
3 months. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a really interesting lesson case study on doing something that maybe you don't have a huge model on, but just kind of just going out there on passion and kind of building your parachute once you jump and just figure it out as you go. And as you all heard, she's profitable. We will definitely have the links to your to get in contact with you as well as with your practice in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other parting words that you may want to say? Anything that you want to leave the audience with before we leave?
I guess the big piece of advice I have is don't underestimate yourself.
There you go. Boom.
There are going to be days when you want to quit yourself. Like there have been many days I'm like, I quit RVA Baby, but don't underestimate yourself. Stick it out, follow your vision. You'll get there. Just got to be patient. You might be broke a little bit, but you'll get there.
Appreciate that. That's dope. So y'all, make sure you check out the show notes and the links to get in contact with Dr. Janet West. Once again, pediatric newborn concierge clinic. I haven't seen too many of those. And this was really a great case study and great to hear from you. And I wish you nothing but success. And I'm very interested to find out in a couple of years if you're able to branch out, if you decide to take the, owning the practices in the other cities, or if you decide to do like a franchise model. But nonetheless, kudos to you and congratulations.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you and let you know. Maybe we can talk funding.
Hey, there you go.
All those things. Yeah.
We got some ideas here on this show on how to figure this out. So.
All right. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All righty.